The Chancellor was in a good place yesterday. He's got strong growth, low inflation and the highest level of employment since 1971. And all of this meant he had an opportunity to give most people in the country something just before an election. And we aim to give you a flavour about what he told us yesterday.
In terms of the impact on North West business, there's a number of things. The first one is the corporation tax rate. It's been trailed for a number of years and we're finally from April down to one 20% rate of corporation tax for every company, which is absolutely great, and it means that groups of companies have got much simpler tax affairs. But from a global perspective, it's the lowest rate in the G7 and it's joint lowest in the G20 group of companies, so it should be really good for competitiveness in international business. On top of that, we've got the really generous R&D tax credit regime in the UK. That's been improved slightly in the budget so that small and medium-sized companies can have a 230% tax credit rather than 225%. We're seeing some reining back of the patent box regime because sadly that was a bit too generous, but there is talk of a successor to that, so hopefully that will still be really useful for local businesses. In terms of capital expenditure, at the moment we've got the really generous annual investment allowance of 500,000. That's set to end at the end of December this year. Now the Chancellor hedged his bets a little bit in the budget speech. He talked about the fact that he recognises that it can't drop down to the 25,000 that it's supposed to, but he wasn't going to tell us what it was going to change to. And he said he wasn't going to tell us what the answer to that was until the pre-budget report much later in the year. So I think that potentially gives a little bit of uncertainty to businesses who are planning their capital expenditure. And we probably just need to make sure that we talk to them to make sure that they can maximise their tax reliefs. In terms of other measures for employers, there are a lot of changes to employment tax coming over the next couple of years. We've got some major consultations underway, some major changes to the way that benefits are taxed and reported, so it's going to be important that employers keep on top of those and don't fall foul of changes in the rules. And the final thing in terms of North West businesses is the fact that we've got this growing skills gap. More and more businesses are struggling to find good people, and I think the continued support for apprenticeship and the fact that a number of businesses taking on apprentices has grown so rapidly over the last couple of years is really a good sign that businesses are investing for the future in people. In terms of the impact on individuals from the budget, there was lots of minor changes, but I think the really big one and the really interesting one is the abolition of tax returns as we know them. We've seen millions more people having to submit tax returns in recent years as they've crept into higher rate tax. So even people with relatively simple tax affairs with maybe some employment income and a bit of bank interest have had to make tax returns. And if they haven't done that, then they've had to pay penalties. So being able to do something online where the revenue are actually able to extract all of that information centrally and then people can just go on and check it, it's got to be a good thing. I think where it gets a little more interesting is where people have got more complex tax affairs and they'll need to make sure that the revenue have got the right information and also check what's being done with their tax affairs to make sure that it's right. We've also got the suggestion that the revenue will be able to link into people's accounting systems in their businesses to extract information, which I think is proving a little challenging for a lot of businesses to think about at the moment. The other aspect of planning that's really going to affect individuals is in the whole world of estate planning and pensions. We've seen some really interesting changes in the pension rules, and that has a real implication for people in their estate and inheritance tax planning.
Jane's talked about money purchase pensions and the interaction with inheritance tax. It's now possible to pass pensions down the generations. There's no need to buy an annuity. You can draw on your fund directly whenever you like. When you've gone, your spouse can draw on it after you, and then it can be passed on to the children. The children pay tax on the income they draw at the marginal rate of tax, or if the last person to use the fund died under the age of 75, there's no tax at all. So our advice is, spend your other funds and investments first and keep your pension back for as long as you possibly can, and you can access it whenever you want. There's massive flexibility, a great opportunity to plan ahead and reduce tax. The sting in the tail is that the lifetime allowance is reduced to £1 million, and that sounds a big number, but in pension terms it isn't, so it'll affect a lot more people. So with all these things, the devil really is in the detail, so if you have any questions about any of the issues we've raised today, please don't hesitate to get in touch.